Hello all, Rick here. In Star Trek, we often see the Federation contending with the Borg threat, ever since their introduction, and recently we have received further lore and developments when it comes to other powers and how they tackle the Borg, like the Romulans. Romulans, who, let's not forget, were dealing with the Borg for at least as long as the UFP was, just behind closed borders. We also know for sure that the Borg have encountered the Klingon Empire before, as we have seen assimilated drones who were formerly Klingon, like Korok in Unimatrix Zero. But we've never seen direct contact in canon, never seen the Klingons engaged the Collective, nor have any clue what their protocols and priorities are with the Borg. Both the Federation and Romulans seek out Borg technology for its advanced nature and potential for reverse engineering. The Empire's acts are still unknown, so we have to turn to non-canon sources to flesh out an image. So, we know for certain that the Borg were operating in the Delta Quadrant, likely beyond the Federation's sight out in the direction of the Romulans and Klingon Empire. This is because they were skirmishing with Species 8472 in this area, as mentioned on screen. Fortunately, however, the Klingon Empire is likely spared a majority of the encounters with the Collective, as both the Federation and Romulan territories lie between the Empire and the point of origin of the Borg, the Delta Quadrant. However, it is suggested that several of their more remote outposts, like Kalgothar, were scooped up by the Borg in a similar way to the New Providence colony. When the battle for Wolf 359 was approaching, the Federation actually requested aid from the Klingon Empire, and the Empire answered. But the battle was such a decisive loss that it was over before the Empire's fleet even made it to the system, and the cube continued its path towards Earth, away from the Klingon fleet. After the encounter with the first cube by Q, Starfleet was relatively open with the information that the Enterprise gained. While their response and tactics were clandestine, they shared the reports on certain things. Remodulating weapons fire frequencies extended the usefulness of their energy weapons. The Borg would ignore unthreatening behaviour for the most part. It shared the nature of assimilation, and so on. It was all shared with any other galactic power in memorandums and briefings through the UFP's wide diplomatic and ambassadorial networks. After all, it was clear from the outset, with the Romulan issues with the Borg, that the Collective was never going to be a Federation-centric issue, and there was no political alliance or schemes to be conducted with the Borg. They were an invasive threat to every species that valued individuality and self-determination, regardless of the UFP's view of them. Of course, at the time, the Klingon Empire was an ally of the Federation anyway, and thus notified of most breakthroughs or encounters that Starfleet had with the Borg, and vice versa. However, some technologies were not shared, such as the transphasic torpedo. This is not due to not trusting the Klingons or trying to retain a one-up over the Empire, but simply to reduce the likelihood that knowledge or designs of the transphasic torpedo would fall into the Borg's hands via assimilation. Some ace-in-the-hole options were too valuable to share until the last minute. So, the Klingons incorporated a lot of the same common alterations into their combat plans. Rotate shields to avoid tractor locks, and randomize disruptor frequencies. However, the Klingon cloaking tech was of mixed success. While the Borg were capable of piercing a cloaking field, they had to be actively scanning for the cloaked ships in the first place. But the Klingon ships would have fared a little worse off against a cube than Starfleet vessels thanks to Starfleet's own adaptability. Klingon ships are capable of a lot, and they have advanced scientists and engineers, of course, but the ships themselves are built for a little less variability and more straightforward acts. This makes it easier for the Borg to adapt to them, and it would take a particularly clever captain with a prepared vessel to stand up to the Collective. Raw power tends not to do much against the Borg if you give them a minute to analyse it, unless you're species 8472. So, Klingon tactics would likely have to resort to hitting hard and fast, as a drawn-out combat is only going to tilt in the Borg's favour. Now, the Klingons do have one advantage against the Borg, that is, their physical prowess and cultural preference for melee combat. Borg drones are generally more powerful than most humanoids, and on par with the Klingons at the least. However, their adaptive shields offer no protection against a bat'leth. So, the Klingons would not shy away from melee combat in the same way Starfleet officers tend to, as it is not the same disadvantage for them, and in some instances they may actually fare better. Whether or not this would encourage them to take boarding actions is unclear, but unfortunately unlikely. Maybe an assault team could beam over during a moment of Borg vulnerability to plant a photon or something, but they'd have to force an opening first, and it's very risky. Because there is one thing about the Borg Collective that strikes fear into the most proud warriors of the Klingon Empire: assimilation. Not only is it the living hell that suppresses you under a sea of voices, then uses you against your own people, but it keeps you practically alive. There is no glorious death in combat to those who fall against the Borg, and are taken by them. Because of this, there is no way for a Klingon who suffers this fate to pass into Stovall Core and join their ancestors in the afterlife. Assimilation is a cruelty in that it denies the fallen even their respite and honoured reward, and this is seen as one of the greatest threats to the Klingon culture that the Borg present. Because of this, Klingons would often seek to pursue and destroy any assimilated or fallen vessel to ensure their comrades' peace. This too was often a futile effort, however. The most non-canon Borg versus Klingons we can find occurs in the games of Star Trek Armada and the Splinter timeline chronology of the Destiny novels. The latter features a full-scale Borg assault of the Alpha and Beta Quadrants. So, in an overall summary, the Klingon response to dealing with the Borg would be to attempt to destroy them as quickly as possible with as much firepower as they can muster, employing the universally accepted tactics. If this fails, then they may attempt to lure them away from weaker targets or exploit an opportunity to get an assault team aboard the Borg vessel to sabotage or destroy it from within. The assault team destroying a cube with themselves on board is far preferable than assimilation after all. Amidst all this, however, it is likely that the Klingons, depending on the era we're in, would actually just call out to Starfleet to assist. Or, let's be realistic, wait for Starfleet to offer assistance. After all, the Federation has the better chance of dealing with the adaptability of the Borg than the Klingon Empire does. What do you think? There's a couple more videos in this vein I'd like to tackle too. The Dominion, for example, but then that's even more speculatory in nature. Until the next video, however, I've been Rick, thanks again, and goodbye.